friends! So this week, the book I have for you is Infinity Sun by Adam Silvera. I think I grabbed this book in my Barnes & Noble book buying spree. As you can see, it's a signed edition, and I was really excited about those for my last book haul. I think I also saw a Bookstagrammer talking about it in her mail opening video, where I think she had got it from the publisher and talked a little about it, and it sounded interesting, and she seemed excited. So when I saw that there was a signed edition I could grab, I grabbed it. But I'm kind of wishing that I hadn't. So before we get into that, though, I want to give this book its due and hit some of the usual points before I start talking about my opinions about it. A brief overview of the book is that we follow two brothers, Emil and Brighton, who've grown up idolizing the Spellwalkers. They're a group of people who have celestial powers, who use their powers for good and try to stop people committing crimes, often similarly powered people. In the boys' idolization of this group, they've been wanting powers their whole lives and imagining what their lives would be like if they had these celestial powers. And through a turn of events, they actually get to be part of the Spellwalker team. And so that means going out to battles, and things are a lot grittier than it seems like either of them were prepared for. So the points of view are actually a little different than what I've been seeing lately. This whole story is told in the first person present tense. We do a bit of switching in between characters. We follow both of the brothers and then two different people with powers. I think we only cycle between the four, but there might be another one or two thrown in there. I'm unsure. At the beginning of each chapter, we get the name of what character will be narrating that chapter for us. So it felt pretty easy to follow the entire time, but might be a good kind of segue from single perspective narratives to switching between different characters. So the kind of themes or morals that I found present in this book really seem to stem around power struggles. We see Brighton's absolute thirst for celestial power. Both brothers wanted it at some point, but Brighton seems to want it a lot more. We see Luna, who's our kind of bad guy character, who is on a quest for immortality. And then we see one of the Celestials we follow named Maribel. She wants to know what really happened with her parents, so she has the power to clear their name. A lot of the other Celestials, a lot of the other characters, I would say you could just sum up. They really just want enough power to make life for Celestials a lot more bearable. They're really not treated well, so that's what it seems like the rest of the characters are all after, is kind of equality for the Celestials. So while that kind of seems to be the morality that the book is discussing and examining, it can get a little dark in what some people can do for power. Again, Luna is the bad guy, and so it can get pretty dark, the extent that she'll go to for immortality. So I think that this would be an intermediate stage of morality, because even though it's pretty easy to say that she's bad, evil, terrible, you can also kind of get where she's coming from, that want to stick around in the self-preservation. So it's not just evil stamp. There's a little bit of explanation of her values and whatnot. So this is one of those books that has very little time for romance. There's battle after battle, a rest and recovery scene, and then battle again. And there are, I believe, only two established couples when the book starts. Heck, and I think even at the end too, because we get so little time for romance. I have trouble remembering if there's even a kiss or not. What stood out to me as the most intimate scene was when one of the characters who's in a relationship mentions sleeping with her partner, and I really didn't get the idea that they were hinting at anything more inappropriate. It's just well, they've been dating for ages and on the run for ages. Of course, they're probably going to sleep in the same bed. So like I mentioned in the previous section, we see battle after battle, and when you're going to fight that frequently and fight with the magic equivalent of guns, which are wands that are charged with their own energy that anyone can use, but they fire little bolts of energy. And then the characters have superpowers. Some of them can manifest things. One of the characters can control the wind, one can sling fire, but then we also see powers that just heighten kind of already innate senses. One kind of seems to have super strength, one can levitate and uses that to fight slightly different, and she uses that to fight slightly differently. There are projectiles being launched and puncturing people that way. There are people like fighting hand to hand and like the crunching of bones and stuff like that. And because there are so many fights and there are all these dangerous elements to it, some people die. So I would say that the frequency and the level of violence are both probably enough to rank this in a more mature field. I want to start with saying, like, I'm sorry. I don't think I've made a video that's been too, like, hypercritical of a book. The person in me that wants to be polite and encouraging and not say anything bad about anybody wants to just say this book was fine. And I'll definitely start with an element that I enjoyed, but I did not enjoy reading this book. It was not for me. And some of those things I think are personal, and I can totally understand why other people enjoy it. I don't think it's like that absolute garbage, but I did not enjoy it, and I'm ready to tell you about why. So if those kind of things might apply to you, then now you would know, and so you can know to avoid this book. But because I want to pay it a compliment before I get on to my complaints, I really did enjoy the plot. I think that this story could have been better told in a comic book narrative because there is a lot of fighting, and the world sounds colorful. Like, there are some interesting details where I'm like, oh wow, you really like thought about that. But I think that those details could be just fine as like background details in the background of a comic book like panel. But there were enough like twists and turns here and there. There was enough of a mix of, hey, we kind of know how things are gonna go, but still a few like surprises here and there. So that helped me enjoy the story a little bit more. I'm gonna start with my most easily defensible stances down to like the least easily defensible. Something that I think that might irk any fan of reading or anybody who's read so much. The characters were not done well. It's kind of the same complaint I had when I read Lore a little while back. The characters seem to really just rest on, well, here's an archetype of what a character is, and like somebody who has gone through the struggle, and like, well, you know what they're like, right? Like, yeah, you've read things, you know what they're like. And there's a place for that. But I don't feel like we ever extrapolated past that, even for the main character. The main characters, none of them felt unique, and I didn't like any of them. That's not true. I'm just gonna call her Prudence, actually, because that's easier for me to say and kind of what I was saying in my head as I read it. I can't say too much about why I enjoyed her without spoiling anything, but there's a big like plot element that involves her that made me like her even more. I won't harp on every character, but to just go through the main characters real quick. The brothers, Emil, I didn't like him. He was too soft-hearted, and that's coming from me. Like I just said, I don't want to say a negative word about anybody at any point, but this guy was still too soft-hearted for me. That's just not a trait I want in my protagonist. Second, Brighton. I was kind of vibing with him. He was like the salutatorian. He's worked really hard for school. He really likes celestials, and so he's got like a YouTube channel, and he tries to find out as much as he can and like film them and put them up and like interview them or whatever if he can. That's great. He's got initiative. Like he's going places. And then he has a moment where he freaks out about his YouTube. And not just video channel, it says YouTube. And he, maybe it's because I have been making content for at least a year and I don't even have the numbers that he's talking about, which is fine. But the key reason is that that's not why I do it. I do it because it's fun. I enjoy the editing process. I enjoy filming and feeling like I get the chance to talk about the books that I'm reading. That's why I do it. It seems like the emphasis for him wasn't that that's why he does it. He does it to get views. And I just think that mindset is so upsetting. I don't like it. It really got me rankled. So those are the two brothers, the two Celestials that we follow. One is a member of the Spellwalker team. Her parents die in an incident that takes place well before the events of this book, and her main motivation throughout the book is that she wants to uncover what really happened that day because she doesn't believe the videos that she saw. She thinks there was something else going on and that her parents are not to blame. They didn't do that. Or if they did it, they had a good reason. Something like that. That's her whole motivation, and that's her whole character. She's upset, and she's sassy, and she's always on edge because she's always worried about that, and there's very little time for anything else. There is no character growth. I just don't know. I found it far too simplistic. The other Celestial that we follow, his dad was mean, and so he's grumpy, and he doesn't trust anybody, and he hates everybody, and he just doesn't have a place that's his. And Again, no character development. Maybe it's because we jump back and forth between too many characters or there was too much story to tell. There were not enough details for any of these characters to make me like them, and they all seem to very much just stick to like a stereotype or like a blank canvas for you to step into. So the second, like, less easily defensible element, I would say, is the writing style. I'm gonna try my best, but it's really hard to articulate. I think the best way would be able to show you examples, but I wasn't thinking about it at the time, and it was one of those things that when I read it, it sounded weird, but when I tried to like examine it and really think about it, I was like, well, that's not maybe that weird, and like kind of just tried to gloss over it, but it just kept happening with such frequency. And I think the most distillated version of what I was feeling is that it's too talky, in the sense of, if I was going to talk to you about different food that I like, I would probably say, oh, I like this, I like that, this is good, that's good. Like, I wouldn't be too verbose in my day-to-day language. Your thoughts in the moment are just too spread out to really spend that much time agonizing about which way you want to say these things. But if you were to write about something that you enjoy, would you really write the same sentence over and over again of, I like this, I like that, this is good, that is good? No, you would probably use different words to vary the sentence structure, because this is something you're preserving. Whether it's for something important or not, why not just take an extra moment or two to say, well, instead of like, maybe I could say enjoy. That's another word that everybody uses. I'm not really flexing my vocab muscles, but it's different. I'm not saying the same thing over and over again. I feel like that's the best way to frame the kind of issue that I had with this. I feel like a lot of the book was written in that way. And I'm excluding dialogue because I totally understand and like even appreciate when people go through certain hurdles to really try and make you hear the character the way that they're imagining them speaking. But it can just be ways of phrasing things, but in this book, those sections were not dialogue. They were like descriptions of where somebody was at or what they were doing. Or even, I think at one point there was a worry about the party that was phrased in a manner to me that seemed odd to write down. Like, I hope they're all good or something like that, I think. Again, it's hard without specifics, and I'm sorry I wasn't thinking about it at the moment to note specifics. I think it was one of those things that creeped up on me as I read the book, and once I got towards the end, I was like, oh snap, that's a slightly better way to phrase what I don't like. I feel like I talked about that for a long time, so I'll be really quick on the last point. And this one is the least well defensible and something that other people probably won't be frustrated by, but I had a similar idea to what happens with the brothers in this story to kick off the whole story. And that made me a little more critical about the plot. And there's a lot of things thrown in there that I don't think need to be. That, yeah, you have to have a world and things going on in the world, but there's also a lot to examine with the brothers and their interactions and relationships and their struggles for power. I just think this book had too much going on, and I could kind of feel it towards the end when I read the acknowledgments and I saw some of the things that he listed as sources that inspired him, and I was like, yeah, friend, because I could see all of them in this book. Almost all of them. He mentioned the Winchesters. I didn't see, well, there were ghosts, I guess. But I just felt like the plot was too all over the place and trying to pull in all these different things and even pull together all these different worlds. The celestial power is kind of superpowery, but also kind of magic-y. There's mentions of, like, essentially Harry Potter with finding out that you're special and being whisked away to some school. Like, we all know what you're talking about, my friend. I wish he would have taken a slightly more narrow approach when it came to the plot and what all to include and not include. Sorry for that long-winded opinion section. Thank you for watching that, or welcome back if you skipped along through it. The too long didn't watch for my review overall would be that this book might be good if you enjoy comic books. It's a kind of story that I think would have been better told in a comic book than in an actual book. The violence can be rather mature, so I would say you might want to keep away younger readers. But the way the story is written doesn't seem particularly adult or mature either. So I don't know who this book is written for. Maybe it's written for young, action-packed people who don't much care about vocabulary. I would say, as for what I enjoy, I would not actively recommend this book, and I will probably be getting rid of it. I don't think I want to hold on to it, which is a shame because now I have a signed first edition. I know I did a call for engagement a little while back, so don't worry, I'm not gonna do that again. However, this time instead, I want to say thank you. Thank you for bearing with me through sometimes the extra crummy audio, sometimes the crummy lighting, sometimes the bad video quality. My setup changes every time. I almost never have the same setup twice. So there are some times where I'm embarrassed, but I've already gone through so much, and I still enjoy the process. So I still want to put it out there, even if it's not my best foot forward. I'm still continuing down the path. I just want to thank you for bearing with me through all of that and watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope that you get to see you again next time. Bye for now.